Hello students, and welcome to yet another video lecture. Today we're going to be talking about specific and figurative language, or as I like to say, negotiating meaning. Negotiating meaning basically refers to the interchange between the speaker, or the person who is communicating, and the listener, or the audience, the person who is receiving the communication. And this is important because our words are how we transfer our thoughts, and different words carry different weights. So without further ado, let's begin by talking about denotation and connotation. So this is not something new to you. This is something we talked about when we talked about vocabulary. But just to reiterate, denotation is the dictionary definition of a word. Connotation, on the other hand, is more of an implied or shaded meaning. And it's important to know this because a word's dictionary definition is not necessarily the most important definition. Often it is the connotation that will affect your audience and judge how well your intention is being perceived. So let's start by talking about bias. So bias is the opposite of fair. Bias is one-sided. It does not allow for an objective view. It allows for a very subjective view. And bias is often discussed when you're talking about ways of misleading. So bias occurs when an author has decided to mislead by omission. Either they're leaving out details or they're ignoring contradictory evidence. It's possible that they're being selective with the kinds of details that they provide. It could be that they're making incomplete comparisons, that really they're saying, well, on one hand, homeschooling is the better route to follow to produce a well-educated child, whereas on the other hand, what? They've never explained what makes it better. Better in comparison to what? Also, if an author is using passive voice, that means that they're not revealing who is the actor, who performed the specific action in that sentence. So therefore, the cup was broke, the bill was paid. The question then is by whom? Now, related to that, another way to mislead by omission is by using unspecified nouns and pronouns. So this is something that you hear a lot of conspiracy theorists saying when they'll say, oh, well, they don't want you to know that. Well, who exactly are you referring to by they? So misleading by omission is actually not a very good way to persuade your audience. Another mistake that people make sometimes when they are providing information is they'll make sweeping generalizations. A sweeping generalization is a statement that someone makes about a group of people. And this is related to an unsubstantiated assumption. An assumption is something that the author presents as true without ever providing evidence. And these two are related because often when people make generalizations, they do not support them with sufficient evidence. Finally, getting more into the figurative language aspect of this presentation, cliché is something that you will have to study if you are not a native speaker of English. It's an overused expression and it's often idiomatic. So this is something like water under the bridge or get back up on the horse, something that has entered into our language as a community, as English speakers, that really is overused and has therefore lost a lot of meaning. So for example, curiosity killed the cat, bigger is better, blind as a bat, those sorts of things. In hot water, idiomatic phrases. And cliches should always be avoided in academic writing because they don't really translate well, and good academic research should be universal. Jargon. Jargon is field-specific language. So those of you who are studying to be nurses, you are going to have an entire class called medical terminology. And when you get there, you will know all the jargon for the medical field. Similar with criminal justice, and really any other field, including education. So jargon is a field-specific language. It's words that people in a specific discipline use. Allusions, not to be confused with illusions, are references that an author could make to myths, religion, pop culture. I have a group of friends who actually make a ton of pop culture references, so many that it's hard to keep up. Once again, this isn't something that you'll find over much in academic language. You'll find it a lot in things like poetry or creative writing because it has the ability to evoke a large amount of imagery with only a few words. Euphemisms. Euphemisms are ways of sugarcoating language. So rather than saying, well, we went to the vet and the vet told us that we had to kill our cat. You know, it's a very harsh way to present that information. So rather than say kill the cat, you would say suggested that we put it to sleep or put it down. It doesn't necessarily soften the loss, but it certainly doesn't make it such a blunt ending. So euphemism is when somebody tries to soften or sugarcoat language. Doublespeak, and the reason why I use the empty glass here is because doublespeak is essentially empty. Doublespeak is where you purposefully do not say what you mean. So, for example, if I ask you where your homework is and you tell me how much you enjoy my class, you have not answered the question. For a really good example of this, go to the interactive. It's the one with the guy who looks totally scared by the questions the reporters are asking him. Inference is one of those things that you'll find out more about in the Prezi presentation. But just to summarize, kind of wrap this up, an author's tone is basically the mood or the feeling that the author is trying to evoke. It's the words that they're using to try and persuade you to feel a certain way about something. And the more specific your word choice, the more that your message comes across. So if you're selecting words with connotation in mind and you're selecting words that avoid cliches, or if you're selecting certain allusions, you're going to be sending a very different message, and therefore you're going to be negotiating a very different meaning. So thank you, and let me know if you have any questions.